Greetings and welcome back. When I left you, I told you that one of the biggest differences, and there are many, between an American president and a British prime minister is that there are many routes to being an American president. Many have served in the federal government for a long time. For example, our current president, President Biden, served more than 3 decades in the Senate. For another 8 years, was vice president. But on the other hand, Donald Trump, the president before Joe Biden, had not served in government at all. Some people were governors, some were senators, some were military heroes. The point is that a person can come from virtually any segment of American society and become president of the United States, and that is not true in Britain. In Britain, there's only one road to becoming prime minister, and that is serving in the House of Commons and then serving in the cabinet. Told you that over the years, it's typical that someone spend 20, 25 years in the House of Commons before they become prime minister. Some people have been more than that. Churchill was 38 years, Margaret Thatcher was 25. And when I left you, I wanted to use as a case study Theresa May, who was the prime minister before our current prime minister, Boris Johnson. And I just happened to have her resume with me. And so, out of convenience, I decided to use it. But I also decided to use it because she is a pretty straightforward case study. Like most prime ministers, the first time she ran for political office, the first time she ran for parliament, she lost. I pointed out that Margaret Thatcher, who many consider the most powerful prime minister since the death of Winston Churchill some 6 decades ago, actually lost her first two attempts to get elected before winning. Theresa May did win her second bid for Parliament in 1997 and worked her way up the party by serving in multiple cabinet roles. And as it turns out, Theresa May became prime minister 19 years after joining Parliament, and that is pretty typical. Um, I don't think I need to go through all of the offices, but if you just take a look, later in the next, probably two mini lectures from now, maybe three mini lectures from now, when I get to the British cabinet, one of the big observations, one of the things that's going to stand out for test purposes, is that British cabinet secretaries are a lot more powerful than American cabinet secretaries. American cabinet secretaries are actually, in most cases, very weak unless a cabinet secretary in the United States has a personal connection to the president that is strong. Then they really don't have any independent power base at all. But in Britain, because their cabinet secretaries are leaders in the party, because they also serve in the British Parliament, and because the future prime minister is going to come out of that small group, British cabinet secretaries are very, very powerful. And a test of potential prime ministers is, do they understand the big picture? Can they oversee a variety of agencies? And unlike the United States, where we place an emphasis on specialization and we want to get the best and the brightest person who understands that particular policy area, in Britain, cabinet secretaries are chosen for their political qualifications. And so the thought in Britain is, if you are a bright person, you can be adaptable. And in essence, you can serve as a cabinet secretary in virtually any capacity. And certainly, if you take a look at Theresa May, it is remarkable. If you take a look at this list, right, she served as the shadow education secretary from 1999 to 2001. And when you see the term shadow, that just means that her party was out of power. At all times, there is a cabinet that is in power. And then there is a cabinet that is out of power. And even though they're not making policy that governs the country uh, at a moment's notice, literally in a matter of 3 or 4 weeks, depending on what happens, if there is an early election and they happen to win, they're in power. Or if there is an election, almost immediately the winners take office. And so in Britain, there are really two cabinets, one that's actually governing and one that is investigating, analyzing, and kind of overseeing uh, policy prescriptions if they are to come to power. So for 2 years, she was an education secretary, a shadow secretary. Then she moved to transportation, where she was secretary for 3 years. Then she moved to culture, media, and sport for a year. Then she became a leader of the Commons. Then she worked as the pension secretary. And then finally, her political power under Mr. Cameron, who is mentioned in your book, becomes the Home Secretary. Her party was finally in power. And then, of course, when Cameron stepped down because uh, his stance on Brexit uh, failed with the voters, he resigned and she became prime minister 19 years after joining Parliament. Now, think about how different this is from an American president. You are not going to get an American cabinet secretary is not going to be the future leader of the country. Some governors might become leaders. Some senators might become presidents. Some vice presidents may become. But cabinet secretaries are not where we are going to draw future presidents. So if we take a look at some tasks of the prime minister, there are several of them. Some look like an American president, but some are very, very different. In Britain, the first one I have mentioned in the notes is party management. This is much more important than in the United States, although we consider the president their chief of party. We consider the president as somebody who goes out and works hard and tries to get both House members and senators elected. But in Britain, that connection uh, is uh, is greater. Uh, Party management is very important because you truly have a party government. In this case, a prime minister has worked a long time. I told you Theresa May 19 years to get to the top, Margaret Thatcher 20, Winston Churchill 38. So by the time someone actually becomes prime minister in Britain, they have demonstrated administrative skills that are superior. They have demonstrated to their party, to their peers, that they have all of the qualifications for leadership. And it's important, of course, because the prime minister has to retain the confidence of their party to stay in power. If party leaders withdraw their confidence, it means the downfall of the government. Uh, the prime minister does have some significant weapons at his or her disposal. As I have listed in the notes, they get to appoint all of the members of the cabinet. They don't need confirmation. 17 to 24 members are cabinet members. There are perhaps up to 50 junior ministers. So there are almost 100 people who have political patronage, who get a plum position as either a minister or a junior minister. And I pointed out that there are four distinct criteria, and I'll say a couple of words about these, and this may surprise you a little bit. Obviously, the first one comes to mind. You might see this for an American president, right? You want to reward your friends, your closest supporters, so certainly personal loyalty is a criteria. The second may surprise you a little bit, co-optation. Uh, One thing I might do if I'm the Prime Minister of Britain is I may have some of my sharpest critics join my cabinet. Some of my sharpest critics in the party. And the reason, remember, goes back to that notion of collective responsibility, that people will support the policies of the Prime Minister in public. So by co-opting them, by bringing them into the cabinet, you do not have to worry about any kind uh, of leaks to the press. You don't have to worry about them going rogue on you, because in order to do that, they're going to have to give up their job as a cabinet secretary, and this demonstrates to the party that you're not loyal, so that hurts you. And of course, future prime ministers come out of the cabinet. So if you leave the cabinet, not only are you seen as not a team player, but you may no longer be seen as a leader of the party. And so you may shoot yourself in the foot from becoming prime minister in the future. As a prime minister, I may also want some form of representative balance. So, for example, uh, maybe I want to include a certain number of women in my party. And this would be a lot more important if I were the leader of the Labor Party than if I were a member of the Conservative Party, because there are a lot more women represented in the Labor Party than in the Conservative Party. So gender might be important. If I'm trying to make an appeal to Scotland or Wales or Northern Ireland, I may put a representative from those regions, if there are some perhaps from my party that represent those areas. And there may be, although I think this is the least important, there may be somebody who has special expertise that would allow them to competently manage a department. Again, this is a major difference between the United States and Britain. The United States places a premium on specialization in expertise, and the British essentially are looking for good minds that are generalists, that can accommodate them to the demands of a variety of jobs. And so those are things that may be important to me. The second is obviously parliamentary performance. This is a huge difference with the President of the United States. The President of the United States does go and make a State of the Union address to Congress, but there are no questions. It is a very ritualized process in which essentially the president reads a speech and the members of Congress listen. In Britain, a prime minister must appear weekly in the Commons, answering questions. We call this question time, testing his or her debating skills with opponents, usually focusing on economic problems or foreign policy issues, unless something very specific has happened, like a terrorist attack, and then maybe you're going to have to address questions there. Now, Roskin and I have a difference of opinion about parliamentary performance. In your book, your textbook author claims that the opposition's major task is to get the prime minister to break under pressure. I think in an ideal world that would be true. Certainly, if you could embarrass the prime minister and make them look bad, obviously you want to do that. But people who are at the level of the prime minister, they're competent people. They can answer questions well. And so I believe, if I were to ask you on the exam, I believe that the primary objective of question time for the opposition is to demonstrate to the British public that we are a reasonable alternative to the party in power. In other words, what they are trying to do is say, look, if you don't like what's going on in the country, if the economy is bad, if our foreign policy is bad, if you don't have confidence in the prime minister and that government, look to us. We are a reasonable alternative. I will finish with tasks of the Prime Minister in the next mini lecture. Have a great day.